Hi, and welcome to this very short video, which is about fruit and veg. Hopefully by the end of the 10-15 minute talk, you'll be thinking slightly differently about them. So the first thing I want to talk about is, why does fruit and veg always get mentioned in the same breath? Why is that phrase so popular? Because fruit is very different to veg, and veg, overground veg, is very different to below ground veg. So fruit is mainly sweet, whereas veg is mainly bitter if it's overground, and below ground veg is very sweet because that's where the sugar is stored for the plant. That's its energy source, that's starch. So I'm going to look at fruit, overground veg, below ground veg, and some of the myths about fruit and veg. So why do we just believe fruit and veg is good for us? That's the first thing. Well, most people that eat fruit and veg tend to be overall quite health conscious, and we call this healthy user bias. So somebody that's eating fruit and veg tends to exercise more, tends to not smoke, tends to not have junk food. And obviously, if you're eating fruit and veg, you're not having sodas and donuts and those sort of things. So it could just simply be that people that eat fruit and veg believe it's healthy, and they're trying to improve their health. So therefore, they're doing all those good things. And just by association, you could think, well, look, they eat lots of fruit and veg and they're healthy, but it might not be the fruit and veg, could be other things as well. And there's plenty of people that eat fruit and veg and also eat meat, for instance. So a major study in 2010 involving over 500,000 people across 23 European locations for 8 years could not establish a clear association, let alone any causation, for fruit and veg making any difference to health, even when they increased the input of fruit and veg. And it is very difficult to see any of the studies actually backing up this myth that fruit and veg is good for us. So a systematic review of 7 different randomized controlled trials, which is the best sort of evidence you can get, not epidemiology. This is much better evidence. They failed to find any measurable differences in weight change between people who consumed high or low amounts of fresh produce. So doesn't seem to be particularly good for health, doesn't seem to be particularly good for weight loss, for instance. And also, we need to tackle things like people saying, well, fruit's been around for thousands of years, it's natural, it grows, it must be really good. But fruit and veg has changed. I'm just going to put some slides up of how fruit used to look and what it looks like now and what's changed. And then you maybe will be thinking slightly differently about fruit. For instance, on the left, a banana from 7,000 years ago, full of seeds, and it wasn't really sweet and soft. It was stocky and hard. And so what's happened is humans have intervened to do some crossbreeding and some hybrid pollination, and they've made bananas completely different. Look at watermelons from the 17th century, completely different to the very juicy, sweet, watery watermelons of today. And it's not just fruit. They've also looked at vegetables. For instance, corn, 7,000 BC, was probably dry as a raw potato, but now it's been grown, so it's easier to peel, it's much bigger, and of course, again, it's sweeter. Same with carrots. Carrots from the 10th century literally look like roots, but now they're bright orange and they're very tasty. And this is all verifiable. I'll put a reference on that page there at the top there, and there'll also be in the show notes if you want to click to see where I got this information from them. Wild eggplants, for instance, not only do they change how sweet they are and their size, but also their structure as well. So it's easier to consume, basically. One of the other things about fruit and veg is people think that no animals are being killed, so this is completely guilt-free. They can eat fruit and veg and not have any worries. But of course, humans deliberately kill animals to stop them eating crops. Whenever there's a new crop going down, you will see signs about pesticide. No vegetable farmer, no fruit farmer wants their crop eaten by anything. I grew fruit and veg when I believed in the high carbohydrate diet, especially when I was doing my bodybuilding show. So I had a lot of fruit and veg, and I thought that it would be good to grow it myself. And my vegetable plot looked like Fort Knox, and it was literally chemical warfare and netting and anything to keep the pests out. The pests being animals, of course. So we know the word pesticide, we know the word homicide, so we know that pesticide is probably killing pests. So that's animals. And these can be particularly lovely animals as well. So we're looking at butterflies, and caterpillars, ladybirds. You know, you can have grasshoppers. There's so many nice animals that are being killed by the pesticides. And of course, it's not just from the spray that the animals will die. Humans will also be impacted by those chemical killers that are put on the plants. Glyphosate, obviously, is the big one there. And you can see that it does kill creepy crawlies, as some people call them, but they are animals and they are dying. So what's going to happen is these bugs are going to be killed, and we're going to get all sorts of wildlife wanting to encroach on the crops. So the farmer will lay traps to make sure that some of the other animals cannot get in there. So badgers, rabbits, hares, mice, voles, even birds are all kept out and all kept away from the crops, losing their natural habitat, of course. Bill Gates buying up acres and acres of farmland in the United States. He's not going to let those crops be eaten by animals. So he will be using pesticides, obviously, and also herbicides. This is being very destructive to the land. And we've got weed killers ruining the soil. And in the soil, what is in the soil? Well, microbes. So okay, they're not cute and cuddly, but microbial life is being killed, but also the quality of the soil is being destroyed by all these fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides. Of course, they're getting into the food chain as well. But don't worry about that. We're not going to just talk about animals. There are animals that die for fruit and veg production. What about the fact of the environmental impact? Well, fruit and veg travels thousands and thousands of miles. And it's easy to verify because you can find out where your bananas are from. For instance, you can look at that on the package. You can probably see it if you go to the supermarket. You can see this is a produce of such and such. The top 3 countries producing bananas, and quite a lot of them: 27.5 million tons from India, 12 million tons from China, and 8.5 million tons from the Philippines. They're just the top 3. So if I have a banana, it's going to have traveled 4,767 miles. If you look at pineapples, for instance, a very sweet fruit, Costa Rica does nearly 3 million tons, Brazil 2.5 million, Philippines again 2.5 million tons, and that pineapple will travel 5,463. And you've also got oranges. Brazil is a very big producer. About a third of the world's output is grown in Brazil. So I could do a very quick calculation that 5,901 miles that orange will travel from Brazil to the UK. I do understand in the UK I can get oranges from Europe, but that's still quite a lot of miles. And if Brazil is such a big producer, you might find that supermarkets will stock the oranges from Brazil because they're so much cheaper to buy in. You've probably heard the mantra of 5 a day. Well, let's look at just 5 a week, the environmental impact of just 5 a week, not 5 a day. So to eat 3 bananas and 2 oranges every week for a year requires 50 trips around the entire world. And that's just for 5 a week. 5 a day, that mantra, by the way, was just plucked out of the air. It's literally an advertising slogan, nothing to do with any science whatsoever. So that's what we call fresh fruit, which again, we're going to come on to in a minute, the word fresh. But packaged fruit, that can travel even greater distances. This is just some diced pears. It does say on the label, grown in Argentina, packed in Thailand. And this example is shipping to the States because I have a lot of clients in the States. So that's 18,000 miles for that small tub of diced pears. So fruit and veg, are they designed to be eaten? Well, actually, they don't really want to be eaten, most of them. Obviously, fruit does in some respect because that's why it's so sweet. Veg doesn't want to be eaten. So what are we talking about here? Plants, they want to reproduce and they want to spread their seeds. And they do it in a number of ways. Fruit entices you with sugar, but their seeds are protected. For instance, I think you'll find that apples, pips have cyanide in them, which obviously you need to eat a lot for it to cause damage to a human, but it will actually damage some animals. Veg does not want to be eaten, but it can't run away, so they use chemicals and other methods to stop predators eating them. For instance, most veg is bitter, the bitter taste. So if you can see this in the common sense, real world examples, most plants have either thorns or spikes, look at cactus and stuff like that, or they have the bitter taste. Everyone knows about Brussels sprouts. You have to put a lot of bacon on the Brussels sprouts to make them palatable. And I think anyone that's dubious about anti-nutrients in plants, well, red kidney beans, I think everybody knows that, for instance, if you don't cook red kidney beans, then you're going to end up in hospital, which definitely happened in the 1970s with some school children who ate some of those. I think only 5 kidney beans and they were hospitalized. But when you look at things that you're being told to try to eat, what is the purpose of them? So, for instance, seeds. Sunflower seeds are a big thing that's pushed to be healthy. What is a seed? Well, a seed is something that the plant wants you to ingest, but not digest. So you're the convenient carrier for the seed, but you won't be able to digest it. They're designed not to be digested. They're designed to be pooped out. So obviously they go somewhere else and then it grows another plant. That makes total sense. And it's going to be no good for your digestive system. And many of the fruits, for instance, have too much sugar. So this is taken from government guidelines here. A medium apple contains 27 grams of carbs. Does have a bit of fiber. I do have a video on fiber. Fiber is not particularly good in many cases, and I have clinical studies to talk about in another video, but we won't get into that, and we won't talk about the fructose content. What we're going to talk about is the carbohydrate content of that apple, and that's equivalent to 5.5 teaspoons of sugar. Obviously not just apples. There are other fruits as well. For instance, banana. This guy I'd like to plug, this chap Dennis has a brilliant YouTube channel, and he does experiments by using a glucose monitor, and he looks at the effect of different foods on his blood glucose, and he does an eye-opening blood sugar test. In this one I've linked particularly, and that will be in the show notes. And Dennis tests himself on 2 different days. Day 1, he has 2 bananas for breakfast, looks at his blood sugar, and then on day 2, he has 2 Hershey's candy bars, waits an hour and tests himself. And those results are amazing, perplexing. I don't want to do a spoiler alert, but I think you might guess where I'm going with what was the least deleterious out of those 2 foodstuffs. Again, a referenced article here. Conclusions, looking at fruit and veg. Increased consumption of fruit and veg, as advocated in public health advice, has no effect on insulin resistance in overweight individuals who are at high risk. So I'm a diabetic and obesity specialist practitioner in the UK, and I have over 300 online testimonials. I'm just small fry really, but many of those people have reversed their type 2 diabetes and come off their medications, and they don't eat fruit. I haven't had fruit for 2.5 years, and I feel like I'm doing okay, and I got rid of my pre-diabetes. But anyway, fruit contains a lot of sugar. Small banana has the equivalent of 5.7 teaspoons of sugar, whereas an egg has no sugar. Has the 5-a-day mantra persuaded us to eat more healthy greens? Well, when the 5-a-day mantra started, that isn't what we saw a surge in. The 2 biggest vegetables that grew in consumption were sweet potatoes and squash. So there you go, both very sugary. A baked potato, is that full of sugar? Well, experts have found that a single 350-gram baked potato without any toppings, which most people consider to be a healthy option, contains 90 grams of sugar. That's almost 3 times the amount of sugar in a can of Coke. So yeah, 1 potato can equal 3 cans of Coke. Again, it's referenced if you want to see that study. And it's not as fresh as you think. This is the other thing about fruit and veg. We all think it's fresh, but it isn't. The produce you buy in the supermarket or grocery store isn't fresh. There are many items like spinach where the leaves have been plucked maybe a few weeks ago, but with many other things like apples, the fruit probably sat in cold storage for a year before making its way to the supermarket. It's common practice, acknowledged by the government. In America, we're using it as a tool because they have the biggest consumption of a lot of these things. But apples are stored at low temperatures with low levels of oxygen and high levels of carbon dioxide. And this slows the natural production of ethylene and its effects. And fungicides are used normally to prevent fungal rots from taking hold. But there has been a new thing since 2002, I think called 1-MCP, or the user-friendly name Smart Fresh, which is a biopesticide, which has been developed and means that apples can now sit even longer in cold storage, not just apples, pears as well. Pears, they're harvested normally before they're fully ripe, stored in bins for 3 to 5 weeks before they're sorted and packed, and then they're transported to a long-term storage refrigerated warehouse where they're stored for up to 8 months. And again, you've got the reference there. the US Trade Center with the pear handling manual, you can check, and it is about 8 months. So if you're thinking that you're getting fruit and veg nice and fresh in the supermarket, well, that pear you picked up might be 8 months old, and the apple might be 14 months old. So what are the post-harvest treatments of fresh produce? Well, pretty much all fruit and veg is treated this way. Again, there is a reference for you. You wouldn't believe that there are physical treatments. They coat it with an edible coating. There's irradiation, sorry. I must put my teeth in. There's chemical treatments, there's gas treatments. There is an endless list at this reference of all the treatments for the fruit and veg. And this is why, you know, you have to wash them and be very careful, but they're sitting there with these things for, you know, nearly a year old. You know, so that's their birthday. Happy birthday, apple. You're a year old. What's happened to all your nutrients? Because fruit and veg is really pushed because of their nutrients, as well as the fact that they're fresh and natural, which we seem to have proved not to be the case. Well, studies indicate that after 7 days in refrigerated storage, after harvest, 7 days, just 7 days after harvest, fruits and veg can lose up to 77% of their vitamin C. So that's 7 days, not 7 months, not 14 months, you know, just 7 days. That's a huge slide down. Antioxidant activity in apples gradually drops off after 3 months storage in the cold. So an apple stored for nearly a year, but that will probably have no antioxidants remaining in it whatsoever. So the nutrition is not necessarily true, not as nutritious as you were led to believe. And then if you do studies of, say, an apple against beef liver and look at vitamin A, vitamin C, E, K, B1, B6, folate, B12, the red is the liver and the yellow is the apple. And the only one that it wins in is vitamin C. And as we've just seen, vitamin C can deteriorate by 77%. So beef liver beats apple hands down in virtually every test. And the plant warfare we were talking about, lectins, oxalates, phytates, even producing estrogen to make bugs infertile so they can't reproduce. We all know about, like I say, the red kidney beans. They're toxic. They have a kidney bean lectin in them, which naturally occurs as a protein in the plant. It stops them being harmed personally, but it can cause us harm. So as we say, vegetables don't want to be eaten. They've developed all these different methods to deter predators. One of those things is having oxalates or oxalic acid, which is found in a wide range of foods, specific fruits and vegetables, as well as nuts and seeds and grains. And they carry various amounts of these oxalates. But I think a lot of people have heard of calcium oxalate kidney stones. That's the biggest thing that is a problem with oxalates. There are other things like joint pain. And this is due to the fact that oxalates have an affinity with binding with calcium. The chemistry of a plant is it wants to take all those nutrients and minerals out of the soil and make sure that it can become a really good plant. So it has ways of binding to these minerals, doesn't want to give them up. There are a thing called lectins as well. Lectins don't get broken down by your digestive juices or enzymes. Instead, they survive the digestive process and they can wreak havoc on your intestinal lining. Lectins are known for their binding properties. Again, the binding issue is a big thing to be aware of. And they can bind to cells that line your digestive tract. And they can also cause damage to vital internal organ and alter hormone and immune processes. Phytates, phytic acid, that's another anti-nutrient that's found in a range of whole grains, seeds, legumes, and nuts. Within these categories, the phytate content of foods can vary greatly. And this can inhibit the absorption of several essential minerals, including iron, zinc, calcium, and magnesium. And again, we've got this reference down the bottom there for you. And this is, again, something in plants because they use it to make sure that they can hold on to those particular minerals. So I'm going to just say it one more time. Vegetables do not wish to be eaten. So they've developed many methods to deter predators. So people with thyroid disorders are often advised to be wary of cruciferous vegetables. And this is because they have glucosinolates, which have an affinity for binding with iodine. And these are found in things like cabbage, kale, broccoli, and Brussels. Sprouts are a rich source of this particular anti-nutrient. So there you go. So you're probably wondering, well, why does fruit and veg get such a good press? Because there doesn't seem to be any evidence it helps with health, not much convincing evidence that it does anything for weight gain or reversing any diseases. It's not particularly fresh in most cases. I mean, if you've got an apple tree in your garden, you pluck an apple and eat it there and then, well, that's pretty fresh. You might be okay, but of course that's seasonal. So you won't be having that all year round, like people eating bananas every single day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. Why does fruit and veg get such a good press? And you can probably tell from the graphic, it's a lot to do with money. We all know now about soybean production. The USA is the biggest producer of this with 108 million metric tons per year. It's made for vegetable oils as well. So it's an agricultural commodity. And this includes canola, rapeseed, sunflower, and flax seeds. All of these are produced to make vegetable oils, and the US accounts for 34% of the world's soybean production, 42% market share when you look at it in value. And it's the USA is the largest exporter of raw soybeans, according to the commodity basis. So that's the reason. It's not about fruit and veg being healthy and good for you. It seems to be good for other people, just the small producers. And there's a lot of money in fruit and veg and seed oils.